Hello, everyone. Welcome my guest today, Patrick Bangert, who is SVP of Data and AI at Search and SVP at various multinational corporates, which are very much AI fueled, like Samsung. Patrick's interests include, to a great extent, AI ethics and how do we regulate AI, and also application of AI in healthcare. So these are two main topics that are somehow also intertwined and that we are to talk about today. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us, and very happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm a pleasure to be here.
Patrick, did you see the hearing of the Senate Committee on AI regulation? The famous one with Sam Altman.
Yes.
What was your impression? Because my impression was that, I hope I won't be hated now about aging, but the average age of the committee was well above 60, and they concentrated at some point at how AI, who protects the rights of artists of country and Western music they love. So everyone had a favorite one. I guess we both have favorite musicians, probably not necessarily country Western. Though the question is, do we know, as a humanity today, how to regulate AI at all?
Yeah, so this is a curious example in a long list of examples where tech entrepreneurs are talking to legislatures in the United States and other countries, where you can see that there are two sets of people in the same room having a conversation in the same language, but they are not communicating with each other at all. Neither side did its homework prior to a conversation like this. The governmental representatives, whether they're senators or other people, did not make the effort, not in Sam Altman's case and not in the cases prior with Apple or Microsoft or Meta or whatnot, to really understand what this technology that we're talking about is. Neither did the technology side really make all that much of an effort to study who these senators are and what their backgrounds are. So we have two sets of people completely talking aside of each other. That's the root problem. Protecting intellectual property is, of course, one of the important things with generative AI these days, because all sorts of content, be it images, video, audio, in the form of music, for example, like you mentioned, text in the form of novels and other creative writing, and so on and so forth, is flowing into this system, which can then reproduce something. So, for example, I can bring my latest holiday snapshot and I can say, dear AI, please produce a oil painting in the style of Van Gogh that looks something like my holiday snapshot. It will do that, and the output is pretty good, and it will be quite similar to the style of Van Gogh. And so now, is that an infringement on the creative genius of a particular human being, in this case, who is no longer alive, but I can do that for a variety of other artists, right? That's the question. The answer to it is still unknown, of course. The legal systems in many countries have not caught up to the technical reality. So here we can talk about all sorts of opinions on what should be or could be the case, but the fact remains that the laws of Western countries or even Eastern countries have not caught up to the fact that these technologies exist today. The difference, of course, being that if I make the effort as a human being to study the style of a particular painter like Van Gogh and try to imitate him, I will have to make an extreme effort over a very long period of time, and I probably won't make it. In other words, it just doesn't happen, or it happens extremely rarely. But AI can very cheaply and very quickly make that effort and actually produce it. So we're talking about something that prior to the AI was possible only in theory, and now is possible in fact. So it's not a little change. It's a complete flip of the switch. Something that was essentially off before is now on, like a light switch. So it's not a small change, it's a very large change. And so what we need to do, we as humanity, is really learn from each other about both sides of this conversation, and come to some sort of common understanding. A similar case opened up in the last few weeks regarding the autonomous vehicles. So autonomous vehicles have been sold, literally sold, under the rubric that they are safer than human-driven vehicles. Okay, cars don't drink alcohol, they don't take drugs, therefore they are safer. Well, it turns out that they are not. So recent statistics that you can find over the last 3 to 4 weeks have been published. It turns out that currently available autonomous vehicles that are driving around at this moment, of course, these are still prototypes, but nonetheless, are in fact 10 times unsafer than those driven by humans on average. And therefore, they pose an additional risk instead of a reduced risk. Fact remains again that most legislatures around the world have no laws to do with autonomous vehicles because those technologies are still very, very new. The legal systems are debating these things. How shall we allow them to operate? Who is responsible in the case of an accident? What are the penalties like, in this case? We don't know. Again, we can have opinions on how it should be. And on the basis of this, I think we are increasingly in a lawless realm. And so regulation is important. Now, to close the loop on your original question, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, in that meeting called for more regulation, which
Yes, I'm
is
so sorry for interrupting, but one of the senators said that this is probably the first time business comes to us, the legislators, and asks for regulation.
Yes, absolutely. It sounded very funny at first hearing, but it is unfortunately not even a tragedy. It is a farce, because what these companies, not only OpenAI, but the other companies involved in this really want is, of course, money. And they want money for themselves and not money for the others. And so they want regulation that is preferential towards them, so that they can continue to make money. But they also know at the same time that developing regulation takes a long time. And in the meantime, they operate effectively in a lawless realm. The more discussion that they can generate around making regulation, the longer it will take for that regulation to actually appear. And in the meantime, they can do what they want and also gain a lot of publicity at no cost to themselves. So calling for regulation in that scenario is really a self-serving motive and not a good thing. It needs to be regulated, yes. Unfortunately, governments should have started earlier, and now they are once again behind.
So, being a lawyer by training, I have a reflection that it's always the case that law doesn't come up with the regulation after technological breakthroughs. However, this time this is at least a breakthrough. I don't want to go into, let's say, very high tone, but this definitely is a breakthrough. I mean, what generative AI showed this year, at least at the level of electricity, so something that would create another industrial revolution. So we did the steam. We had the steam power in the late 18th century. Then we had coal. Then we had electricity. Then what? Personal computers as such. In the late 1940s, 1950s, and now we have AI. So I am relatively calm that I will not, as I joke, eat us all at the end of the day, you know, being not aligned like Eliezer Yudkowsky says, whom I respect very much, but I do not agree with him. The point is what you said, that listening to one another is extremely important, but it also shows, the situation shows how powerful the big tech is and how little power in comparison government has. Because let's say Silicon Valley was created by government, in fact, like by military spending in the 1940s, and it went as such until 1980s. And now I've read recently that governmental spending is relatively small now.
Actually, you'd be surprised. I think if you look throughout human history, including the present moment today, the real financial investor in all sorts of new technology, not only computerized new technology, but physical technology and others, is the military, especially in the United States.
It used to be like that, I know it, but
yeah, and it's still like that. The military is a huge funder. And a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, definitely most of the startups, consider government/military to be one of their biggest and priority customers.
We have in the US, we have at least a debate about how to regulate AI. In Europe, we have something GDPR-like being drafted, not necessarily consulted with anybody, to be honest, and probably over-regulating the industry. And in China, we have some regulation. The Chinese say it's very strict. I haven't read these laws, but some regulation of AI regarding the end users, but not regulating the business, because the business is the state or the Maoist Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, that's the situation that we have today. With the Chinese code, of course, yes, it is very strict. The question is, to what extent will it be actualized? If somebody infringes on the Chinese AI law, will they be penalized? Of course, we don't know, really, because the Chinese legal system is a little, strange. It tends to be applied to people who are against the government, and it tends not to be applied to people who are with the government. And we would think that the AI law would again be applied in that fashion. In other words, it doesn't apply to the government itself, and it doesn't apply to all the actors that are working with and for the government. In Europe, the new AI Act that has been put through the parliament, and that I think will become active in 2 years' time, is very restrictive as well. The question is, to what extent is that going to have teeth? Because of course AI, in opposition to many other technologies, is completely virtual. So I was having a conversation the other day with one of the economic ministers in Germany, and they were saying, well, usually regulation by governments is very effective, because to build a new technology or to utilize a new technology, you need physical things. You need real estate to build a factory on. Then you need machines to make the thing, and so on and so forth. I need to have employee staff and whatnot. So if you infringe on laws, I can send the police to your factory and shut it down. I can release your workers and all that. And then your business is finished. Now with AI, you have two guys in the garage in Silicon Valley develop it. Your server is probably in, I don't know, Russia, another completely lawless realm. And then all that arrives in Germany or France or whatnot is a few bits and bytes over the internet line. What am I actually to police, please? Nothing, right? It suddenly becomes extremely difficult to actually enact, to punish someone for infringing on laws if in actual fact their infrastructure or the origin of their service or their product is distributed in various strange jurisdictions across the world that are themselves effectively lawless. You just can't do it.
So my thinking is that probably, as always in economic history, it will be the business that will force regulation, because it's we may laugh at this situation with the senator joking about that business pressing for regulation, but 1930s antitrust regulation was, I think, forced by smaller businesses at the end of the day. And I had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who works for a big corporate, one of the largest multinationals. I don't name the brand now, but he said, that the problem with AI is that big corporates are afraid of it because they don't know who's liable, and
Right.
they have legal, and legal says it's undeterminable who's liable for what, and this way or the other, we do have the elephant in the room, and we won't get away with it. And it will be used, no matter what. And so I think that I'm rather optimistic in this regard, that the regulation will be forced bottom up.
Well, we can only hope that that will be, in fact, the case. And I very much support that and hope that. Again, the reality is that there are relatively few companies, a handful, between 5 and 10, that are capable at the moment of making generative AI models from scratch, simply because it's so expensive.
Exactly.
And those handful are in a position to do what you suggest, essentially get together and come up with a gentleman's agreement without government involvement and just simply regulate themselves. The danger comes by other entities participating to some extent. So for example, one of the primary use cases of generative AI today is to produce misinformation. So actors who are wealthy, but who do not want to become famous, dictators, autocrats around the world, militaries, can very well start with the open sources that are out there, both open source of code and data, as well as open source of generative AI models. They can implement them. It will be completely unknown by the public that this has in fact happened. And then they can start all sorts of activities over social media and the internet, television, all whatever channels that you want to think of, and present content of their own choosing at scale, without the usual human cost, materials cost of producing content. And they can flood the usual channels in that way. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish such produced content from actual content produced by real people. So that, unfortunately, is one of the primary use cases of generative AI. And I'm absolutely convinced that in the main upcoming elections that we will see in the Western world, these models will have something to say, and it will be on us voters to try to sort out this crap. And that will be a problem. And those actors, of course, will not self-regulate.
Yes, that's very true. And it's these autocrats that try to influence the Western world through their secret services, through their espionage networks, and so on. So there is an excellent book on application of AI in military by Paul Shar called "For Battlegrounds," published this year. I will put a link to it, and it's highly recommended by me. And the surprising fact is that it's not autonomous weapons who are, let's say, the biggest problem to regulate. This is relatively easy to deal with autonomous weapons, to deal with application of AI in military command. From the ethical and from legal point of view, the worst thing is fake news and using fake news by foreign spies, to put it bluntly. And what Paul Shar in this book shows it that hopefully there is growing industry of kind of counter-espionage applications which are discovering what's made up by generative AI. This is, of course, but this relates again to the problem, let's say, what is generated and what is human in the remix produced by the AI app. So this is, to me, this is very, very difficult from technical point of view to implement.
It is. It's very tricky, especially with text. With images, there is something you can do to distinguish a real photograph from a generated one, but nonetheless, it's already difficult. And we can easily imagine that over the next very short time period, a couple of years, it'll become effectively unfeasible, technically unfeasible to distinguish.
And this is something that scares me. Not that, AI becomes a non-aligned Terminator, because I do not believe in it. Let's say from technical point of view, what is your take?
I completely agree with you. So again, to the audience, if you've seen the movie Terminator, where there is effectively a completely autonomous entity, robot, with a mission to assassinate somebody, that is a technology that is out of reach completely with today's technology. I do want to emphasize another point. If you ask any of these generative AI models a question that requires knowledge of the world or facts or figures or numbers, the answer is most likely going to be wrong. So a very simple example that gets thrown around the internet a lot, if it takes one car 1 hour to drive from city A to city B, how long will it take 4 cars? The answer that you'll get most of the time is 15 minutes, because of course doing it with 4 cars, is going to be 1/4 of the time. Well, no, the task of driving takes just as long. So you can see with examples like this, the generative AI models are very, very good at manipulating text and images to look reasonable, but they know nothing at all about the logical content of either the images or the text. They don't know about the laws of the world, like gravity. They do not know the concepts of time, of numbers. They do not do arithmetic very well. They don't do arithmetic on times. So if you ask for how long do things take, it doesn't know. So again, it is very good at grammar, because that's what it is. It's a large language model. It's a language model, therefore it produces text that sounds very nice, but it's in fact content-wise incorrect. So that's what generative AI is good at, and therefore also many of the other things that would be required to make a Terminator, like control of all sorts of physical appendages, like a robot body, is out of its reach. And it cannot combine all these various sensory inputs and make all the necessary conclusions and whatnot. And to teach the AI all of those things as well is something that we don't even understand on a theoretical level, let alone on a practical level. So that sort of evil technology is, if it ever happens, it is very, very far into the future. And to have an entity that we can, by any stretch of the imagination, call conscious or self-aware, or sentient, like one person
Google engineer case.
Yeah, that I believe is completely out of reach.
I agree, though it's very discussable in the academic circles. But let's switch into something more practical, but also related very much to ethics. I've had an episode here on this channel with Ian on the left, who is an NLP expert in healthcare. And Ian is of the opinion that we are way too far from having right to apply deep learning algorithm to medical application cases, because we don't know what's in the black boxes. It's okay to apply deep learning into drug development, but not to actual medical application on live real patients. What is your opinion on the matter? Because this is what I wanted to ask from the beginning to compare.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I disagree with your prior guest. So first of all, there are a lot of applications in life sciences and healthcare that are not directly on the patient. A lot of AI applications that record the conversation between patient and doctor, that make billing and coding easier for the doctor and such things. They have no medical consequences. But if we address the actual medical consequences, let's look at the primary use case that all the computer scientists talk about, which is diagnostics. So practical example, let's suppose patient comes in and may or may not have breast cancer. What happens? And what happens is that a biopsy is taken, a small tissue sample is removed from the patient. Of course, this is a human activity. That sample is then put on one of those glass slides that you put underneath a microscope. And then a person will look through the microscope and count literally the cancerous cells on that image. That takes this person 4 to 5 hours of their time. They will then produce that count. If the count is higher than a certain threshold, you have breast cancer. That, of course, needs to be verified, cataloged, documented, all the rest of it. Will then go back to your doctor, your oncologist, who will explain this to you. That process takes, in the United States, in a good, well-funded, healthcare system, 4 to 6 weeks. It takes that long because the number of people who are capable of sitting there for 5 hours counting cancer cells is very limited. Because let's face it, do you want this job? Probably not. And the number of people who get trained to do this is ever decreasing year on year, because nobody wants to do this for the rest of their career. Nonetheless, that's the job. So the waiting period to get your result is very long, meaning that you will get started with your chemotherapy those 6 weeks later if you need it. If you don't need it, you've spent 6 weeks worrying for no reason. Now, AI can cut this short to effectively 0 time at all. It's possible with AI technologies that you will have your answer before you leave the doctor's office on the day of the biopsy being taken from you. You go in, biopsy is taken, you spend half an hour in the waiting room recovering from the biopsy process, and boom, there is your answer. That's a very serious benefit. On top of it, the accuracy is different. It turns out that on average, a human doctor's diagnostic result is 70% accurate. That means 30% of human-generated diagnoses are not correct. That means in the United States, again, the market for second opinions, getting that diagnosis verified by a second independent doctor, is already a several billion-dollar industry per year, because people do not believe the diagnosis they get from their human doctor.
Now, this is natural that in such case you want to double check.
Of course. Now, the AI in these diagnostic applications usually has an accuracy rating of about 98, 99%. Yes, AI makes mistakes. Absolutely, it does so, right? And when it makes mistakes, the consequences could be significant. But in specialized cases for which the AI has been trained, its accuracy is higher than that of humans. And so while it does make mistakes, it makes fewer mistakes than a random human being. So I actually would say that if the science checks out for specific applications, and breast cancer is one of them, but there are many, many others that I could have talked about, the accuracy is higher, the results are more reliable, the speed at which you get them is not just a financial benefit, it is a very, very significant health benefit to that particular patient. It can save lives, quite literally, by starting early with the treatment. And so I would disagree that medical applications for AI are not good or shouldn't be done.
Not sufficiently developed.
Yeah, they are. And here's a gigantic difference, by the way, that I want to emphasize between narrow AI, which is AI systems that are trained for extremely specific examples like detecting breast cancer, and general AIs like the generative AI, that ChatGPTs of the world, which just sort of verbally answer questions about all sorts of things, whose accuracy rating is quite low, right? If I train a model that is just there to count cancer cells in a breast biopsy image, that's a very specific task, and I can train that model to be extremely good at that task and completely useless for everything else, and then it'll be good at that task.
What is in your opinion, the biggest breakthrough that AI can bring to medicine nowadays?
Honestly, I think the biggest breakthrough to medicine is not in medical applications. It is in the human process at the background of medicine. So I know several doctors personally, and they tell me that they spend approximately 25% of their time with a patient, 75% of their time dealing with bureaucracy. I think the real breakthrough is if those 75% of bureaucracy that doctors have to deal with could be cut at least in half. What you would effectively do is double the number of doctors available to treat people. I think that is the real breakthrough. So automating billing and invoicing and coding and prescription of medicines to patients, automation of note taking, and documentation of whatever has happened in the office, automation of scheduling of appointments, things like this will completely revolutionize the healthcare system and make doctors available to treat patients, as opposed to now, where doctors primarily are bureaucratic administrators who occasionally treat patients.
That's very true. I mean, recently I've been to my cardiologist, who spent out of 40 minutes that she spent with me and also doing, let's say, my heart check, I think that, let's say, 15 minutes she was typing.
Yeah.
So to me, it's also NLP that has huge, not used enough potential in medicine, because gathering all the notes, all the wisdom from all the notes, all the scribes of notebooks, even knowledge sharing in just one medical center among, I don't know, 15-ish doctors seems to be a huge breakthrough.
Right.
Though the biggest breakthrough to me is in general in silico medicine that is starting to be created, and in particular digital twins of our organs. How far are we from recreating digitally all of our body, in your opinion?
I'm not an expert on that, but from what I have read and heard, I would say still quite far. I mean, even if we have reached the point where the research is far enough that we can actually do it, I think it will be commercially effectively unavailable to the vast population of the Earth for any kind of foreseeable future. Such technologies are extremely advanced and therefore extremely expensive and rare. They will not be available at scale for the large population of patients. So solutions like this are extremely cool, but I don't think that they will be real for patients.
coming back to work automation of doctors, this seems like a relatively low-hanging fruit, doesn't it?
It is a relatively low-hanging fruit in the sense that these technologies exist. They are real. You can purchase them today. There are various obstacles along the road to actually deploying them. One of them is, of course, the fact that the users themselves, that the doctors are reluctant and in many cases to use the technologies. The administrators of hospital systems and such are reluctant to adopt these because, of course, they have to pay for them. And partly it is the regulatory bodies that have to authorize the use of these technologies to make sure then that the full cycle respects them, right? You then have, if you're billing to the paying organization is via an AI, will they then accept this and actually pay out the funds? You know, things like this. It's all a chain in the supply chain system that has to be fulfilled, and everybody has to be okay. That's the
So
real
again,
obstacle.
juggling with liability and the
A lot of
legally.
this is liability.
But hopefully, it is to be overcome within the next couple of years.
I think so. I think so. And the driving force would be the physicians themselves, as they say effectively, no, I will no longer spend 2 to 3 hours of my day just billing and invoicing the patients of that day. That is not a constructive use of my time. If enough doctors effectively say that, then change will happen.
Right. The last question I have, um, uh, I always ask physicists on this channel, why did they get into AI? Because it seems like very many physicists go to AI. What studying physics gives you as an AI person, and what it has in common?
Yeah, so I did my physics degree in the mid 1990s, while AI was still in a so-called winter. I then used neural networks a little bit for some research activities in my case, to do with the magnetic fields on the solar surface. And we basically found that solving the differential equations for that turned out to be much more difficult than doing a neural network for it, because we did have sufficient experimental data. And I think that's where the connection happens. If you have enough experimental data, using artificial intelligence methods allows you to develop a model of what you're looking for, with less effort, and probably higher accuracy than if you started from first principles. And that's exciting, because it shows the power of data. You can learn from what is real, the data, as opposed to a theory. If you really do want to match up theory and experiment, you can do that again with now two models. You now have two models side by side, instead of the complicated interaction between model and experiment. So it's exciting that you can do that. And I think many of us as students got interested in it because of that. On a theoretical level, of course, AI is a branch of mathematics. Make no mistake, it's not a branch of computer science. And that is because all of the underpinnings of AI are equations based. You are effectively solving an optimization problem to reduce some kind of a cost function. And constructing the correct cost function is one of the really tricky bits of AI. And there's a lot of literature on what you ought to choose and how exactly you're going to do that. And that's very similar to solving a lot of the physics problems. So I think that background is helpful.
I'm always amazed by, let's say, how many physicists are in AI. And I always, I'm fascinated by physics myself. And it's incredible that physics is like well, it's a trivia to say that this is a new philosophy, because I mean, what's physics and what's philosophy in the human history is difficult to extract. The point is that physics is, always, discovering the world from new, so and turning everything upside down. Most guys spend their lifetime, just trying to discover this one big new thing, and very few succeed, actually. This is what one physicist, very few.
Indeed, and here's another aspect to this. If you have studied physics, to get a career as a physicist is actually quite difficult. The number of people who really genuinely do physics as their job is not very many. And so coming out of a physics degree, getting a career in artificial intelligence, at least in the last 10 to 15 years, has been vastly easier.
And I think it's a good choice, because it has all to do with experimenting and iterating.
Definitely.
Given that we touched the topic of healthcare, this was to be last question, but would you agree that with a quote from Demis Hassabis, that mathematics is the language of physics, but AI is the language of biology today, and that AI can solve various, let's say, biological problems, hence it can solve medical problems of the future, of the current?
No, I don't agree with that at
all. Okay.
So first of all, AI is not a language. You cannot express anything in AI. AI is a methodology for learning things from data, and then how to represent that learning. It is not a language. Mathematics, I can take a pencil and paper and write down things, and you can. It's either correct or incorrect, but I've written something. I cannot communicate with you using AI, right? I can't say, okay, here is 3 billion parameter matrix. There you go. Is that communicating anything with you? Can you do anything with that? No, you can't. So first response, AI is not a language at all. I cannot use it to communicate anything. Secondly, can it solve problems? No, AI doesn't solve problems. AI learns things and then stores a kind of encoded summary of the data that I have given it to learn from. It's just like an intern, right? When an intern joins the company, the intern doesn't know anything, and then you bombard the intern with information. A few weeks later, the intern is now knowledgeable, right? Does that mean that the intern solves problems now? Well, no. It probably creates problems at this point, right? Only 10 years later is the intern capable of solving problems. AI doesn't solve problems. AI learns things and has this summary of the things it's learned. That's all. If AI methodologies ever end up solving a problem, it's because of humans having trained it to do particular tasks. Like I train it to recognize breast cancer. Then what it does is it recognizes breast cancer. Is that problem solving? No. It's not. It's an automation system that does things repeatedly, hopefully with high accuracy, but perhaps not. That's all it is. It's not going to solve any problems.
This probably, I'm glad that I asked this very last question, because this really made me left with a deep thought. It's excellently put it. So Patrick, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for all this, all this wisdom that you shared with us. And hope it's not our last time, and hope it's also thought food for our audience, as it was for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for listening to Sherpa Search on Tech. If you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our show wherever you listen. Thanks again. The Sherpa Search on Tech podcast is a production of Sherpa Search, an executive search firm specializing in the tech industry, helping hire the right people for expert and managerial positions, and advising how to build and develop long-lasting, high-performing IT teams. If you would like to learn more, reach out to us at maciej.szczerba@sherpasearch.tech or visit our website sherpasearch.tech. See you next time.